Well, thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Barry Erickson, and I am Community Engagement Coordinator at Wheaton Public Library. Tonight, we are delighted to bring you Organize Your Photos. Certified photo organizer Caroline Guntur will explain why it's important to tackle your project and cover the processes necessary to get the job done. Caroline works at this full time, enabling her clients to sort out their precious digital and printed images from a jumble of devices, formats, and platforms. She will provide inspiration and motivation to tame our photo collections for our current enjoyment and to preserve it for future generations. With so much expertise and great information to share, we're delighted to turn the mic over to you, Caroline. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a real treat. This is super exciting. I'm always so happy to share my passion with the world. And I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me today. If I could ever help you, let me know. I'm just an email away, so there's no barrier to getting this project started for you. So I'm Caroline. I am a certified photo organizer, and most of you probably didn't know there was such a thing. I feel that professional organizing has sort of gone mainstream, but when you think about a professional organizer, you think about basements and closets and kitchens and things of that sort. So there are people out there just like me who specialize in digital organizing and photos and family history, which is super cool, and it's just a super fun niche to be in. And I always like to start my webinars and presentations with a quick reminder about why we take photos, because it can get so, it can be so easy to get caught up in the whole, I have to do this perfectly. I have to, get all of this done quickly. It's so overwhelming. Where do I start? All of that. And I just want to sort of center you and remind you why you take photos in the first place. And it's to remember important people, to remember life events, and to tell the stories of our lives. And what's happening nowadays is that we take so many photos, but we actually don't look at them again. I'd like to start by telling you just a quick story about the photo that changed everything for me. And I have it right here displayed for you, so hopefully you can see that. On the left there, you'll see that it's me and my mom and dad. And then on the right there, you can see my husband and holding our daughter, and then his parents. His parents live in India. My parents live in Sweden. We are both from different places. And this is actually the only time that they have ever met. So this is a super important photo in my collection. It's actually the most important one that I have. And what happened was that back when this was taken, this was around 2010, 2011, I was working as a photographer. And I always thought that I was doing everything correctly. But at the time, I actually hadn't backed everything up correctly. And so obviously you can guess what happened. We had tech failure. And I remember that day very, very well. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I thought that I had lost this photo forever. And fortunately, due to a just miraculous rescue effort by my husband and other really great people, I was able to get this photo back. But it could easily have gone the other way. And so that day I sort of became very determined of, how do I do this correctly? And I dove into that world. I always felt like I was already in that world because I was a photographer, but I wasn't sure how to back things up correctly. And I hadn't done that redundancy that you sometimes need. So that was a learning lesson for me. And now, because of that, that sort of propelled me into this profession where I get to help others. So my mission since then has been to make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else. I had a really close call, and I'm so grateful that I got my photo back. And I just want to make sure that scenario doesn't play out anywhere else. So let me go over quickly what an organized photo collection kind of should look like. And this can vary slightly, but in general, we like to see that photos are gathered in one place, whether it's printed or digital. So often nowadays we have photos, especially the digital, scattered on different devices, printed photos maybe in different boxes, and we just like to see that it's all together in one place. We also love to see that we have archival or saved storage, whether it's printed or digital. Printed needs archival boxes. For digital, we want to make sure that it's not living on an old computer that's about to crash, right? We want to make sure that the stories are preserved, because without the stories, the photos don't mean that much. We don't know who was in them, and we don't know why they were taken. We also love to see that photos are digitized and backed up. Obviously, as I just mentioned, that's super important. And it also helps if you can actually find the photo that you need within a minute or two without having to go through boxes, or just hard drive after hard drive trying to find your photo that you want to share. And lastly, shared with family and friends. That's why we take these photos in the first place. We want to make sure that they're shared and enjoyed. So if you can do at least a few of these things, most importantly, the backed up part and the gathering in one place, then that's really great. Now, to the other contrast, a disorganized photo collection often looks like this. The prints are not stored properly. You can see here on the left, that is a box that I got from a client. And as you can tell, the prints are just sort of jumbled everywhere. They're not even lying flat. They're just in a big mess, and they get bent and they get scratched and all of that. We don't love to see that at all. Digital photos, like I mentioned, tend to be scattered on multiple devices. Sometimes we see that photos are stuck inside proprietary software, for example, old iPhoto libraries and things of that sort. There's no consistent organizational system in place for the photos, and oftentimes they're not backed up, so we're at risk for tech failure. And what happens is finding that one photo is impossible, because you just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and you never really get to enjoy the photo the way you're supposed to. So I hope that contrast makes sense. And we're going to take a look at how do we get started with all of this. So I always like to tell clients, ask yourself what will have the most impact in this moment, because there are so many different things that you could do. So what would make you feel better? Any step in the right direction is a great step. So if I could wave a magic wand, what would you wish for to happen first? And oftentimes, the easiest thing to start with is photo storage, proper photo storage. So for printed photos, that means archival boxes, just so that we don't see them damaged further. And here you can see an example of one of those old magnetic albums that once upon a time we all thought were so great, because you would put the photos in there and you would stick that cover on there, that plastic. But what happens is that stickiness is really not good for our photos. So we often get photos out of those photo albums as quickly as possible. Here's an example of a client project. You can see here that there's really no coherent storage. It's plastic bins, it's cardboard, it's a bunch of other things. And on the right there, you can see what happens when photo albums are not stored correctly. They get very damaged. This one especially ended up in a basement flood and was very muddy and gucky. And the photos needed rescuing. So we want to make sure that we get that photos just stored in a cohesive way, in a safe way, and that goes a long way. Plastic is not great just because it locks in moisture. So we like to see some sort of natural or organic type of material. Here's a different client project again. You can tell that was a big family with a lot of memories, which is amazing. But again, you could see that it was sort of just thrown in different boxes. I think that was the cause of a moving project, which is fine every now and then, but eventually we want to get to a point where we store our photos really, really carefully. So here is what we love to see as professional organizers. We love to see that we have some sort of box that's archival. Maybe it has some sort of organizational system. It doesn't have to be perfect. These are projects that I work on, and obviously I do this for a living. So you don't have to go to these drastic lengths at all. It can just be as easy as simply getting an archival box and putting the photos nicely inside. But that's what we like to see, that it has some sort of more coherent storage like that. You can also do binders. There are archival inserts that you can get for binders if you love to flip photos rather than looking at them in boxes. I don't use binders myself, and the reason is because of the kids that are in the house. They love to look at photos, and they would just make a mess out of that. So I tend to have the boxes stored a little bit higher, and then I make photo books instead that they can look at. So that's how I do it, but you can pick your way. Whichever works for you is completely fine. And for looking for archival boxes, we recommend a couple of different places. Archival methods, we work with a lot. They're great. Gaylord Archival is another, Native Archival. There's plenty of places where you can find these archival boxes. So just go ahead and look for something in your price range. I'm always happy to recommend something to you. We love to see them have a dark interior so that it doesn't reflect light, so that you don't have to deal with fading. And then that it has some sort of organizational system. Oftentimes they come with these inserts that you can label and just group photos in, which is really great. And of course, if they are complementary to your lifestyle and look great on your shelf, that's even better. One thing you want to be aware of when you're shopping for archival supplies is what's called the PAT test, the photographic activity test. And basically what that is, it's a voluntary manufacturer's test that all of these people who make archival products can apply for and go through. And they get basically a certification that their product is up to standards. And so it's kind of the international standard that manufacturers go by. So you want to look for something that says PAT tested, then you know that that quality is there. Oftentimes in places like, craft stores and stores like that, it'll say photo safe or recommended for archival storage or something like that. And usually those are just marketing terms. It doesn't mean that the product actually are up to standards. So what we want to look for is something that says PAT tested. It is a voluntary test, so not all manufacturers will have it. But you can always check with them to make sure. And a lot of the good manufacturers actually put their products through because they know that it's a selling point. So anytime you see that, you can kind of be assured that it's a good product that's gone through testing. Before I get into photo scanning, Barry, do you have any questions on that part?
Yes, as I'm looking through the questions, some deal with scanning, so we'll wait on those
Yeah.
until a bit later. But someone was asking if there was a good way to consolidate photo albums with photos and perhaps the captions or the information about those photos, what a good way to store those might be.
Yeah, that's really tricky because, as you know, the caption has to be translated into sort of digital form, into the metadata of the photo. And I tend to do that. If I'm dealing with albums, I tend to do that as I scan. You can always do it afterwards, but what I recommend doing in that case is having some sort of photo or reference to what the original layout was, so that you don't take all the photos out and then forget which caption went where. So there's different ways that you can tackle that. And I think it depends on if you're doing it yourself or if you're outsourcing. I personally, if the album is sort of put together as a story, I tend to scan the whole page. And then I also scan and take out the separate photos and store those so that the story is preserved. And then I obviously put that information into the metadata and into digital form. But yeah, lots of different ways to do that. So it's more of a process depending on what your personality is.
Great, thank you. And just one or two other questions that relate to that topic of storage.
Yeah.
Someone is asking about how to organize boxes of printed pictures before they go digital. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to say about that. I think you talked about it a little bit more after that question was entered, but I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say.
Well, yeah, I can mention that I actually love it when somebody takes the time to organize their printed photos before it goes into scanning mode. And the reason for that is that if you're scanning a mess, you're doubling the work, because now you're also scanning the mess and you have two messes to sort out. If you're scanning the organized collection, you are now having two organized collections, and it's easier to reference and all of that. So the more you can organize and select photos for scanning before you get to that point, the better it is. And the easier it is for people like me who actually work on the photos. So it saves you money in the long run if you take the time to do that.
Great, great, thank you. Thank you. Someone else was asking about the archival boxes, and I think you covered that, but I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say about the boxes.
We just love to see that they are good quality, pat tested. Sometimes you have to spend just a little bit more, but I can tell you it's worth it. Preferably not plastic because it locks in moisture. And then just look for good quality vendors. Most of them will actually, I know for a fact, Archival Methods, if you give them a call, they are happy to help you out to pick the right boxes as well.
Great, great. And then probably just one more here. Someone was asking about the binders in that one photo that you showed. What's inside those binders? Were they sleeves, or how were the
Yeah.
photos organized
Uh,
inside those?
Yeah, so those binders are actually, we are memory keepers binders. And so basically what you can do is you can custom your inserts. And so they sell different type of archival inserts for either 4x6s or 5x7s or 8x10s or slides or however you want. And you can actually just mix and match what you need inside that binder. And they're loose sleeves that you can buy in the packages.
Okay. And I think that this question may lead into your next section. The person is asking, are you recommending that people digitize all of their paper photos?
I don't think you necessarily need to digitize everything. Um, maybe I'll get to that. Let's circle back to that one because I think you might see here in the next section about
Okay,
that.
fair enough. Why don't
Yeah,
you go ahead and we'll have some more questions after this section.
sure. Okay. Yeah, perfect. So let's jump into photo scanning because I know that is a hot topic. So I really want you to think about getting your photos, slides, negatives digitized because it really is fun to relive them. And so we're just going to talk about a few options for that. So here are some before photos. You can see that we have again a problem with storage, right? On the top left here, you can see that the negatives are inside of plastic bags, which is, you know, a way you can always gather them when you're first getting started. But after that, you definitely want to remove them from the photos because if that goes near a heat source or anything like that, that will melt. And you can also see that the CDs are not in protective sleeves or anything so they can easily get scratched. And what happens is once the CD gets scratched to a certain point, you can't read it and you can't get those photos off of there. So we definitely want to see better storage than that. Then you have here in the middle a box of slides that came in, and that was actually a fun project. And I'm going to show you some photos from that project that I've had permission to share. And then on the bottom, you can tell that we have lots of photos from, you know, Walgreens and CVS and all of those places. Back in the day, you got those really good 2-for-1 deals. So a lot of us have duplicates. And to sort of circle back to that question of do you scan everything? No. If you actually sit down and you think about organizing your photos ahead of time, it's a lot easier to decide what to scan because you probably have duplicates that if you just hand the box to a professional and you outsource it, they're going to scan everything. They're not going to sit there and look through it most of the time. So it can definitely save you money and time and effort to right size instead of downsize. We always say right size your collection beforehand. And that way you can kind of be very selective about what you want to scan. You definitely don't want to scan everything. Like an example from my own life is my parents had slides like this as well. And they went to Disneyland a bunch of times before I was born. But do we really need those slides of Mickey Mouse? Not really, right? Because I've been to Disneyland, like 1 or 2 is fine, but you know, hundreds and hundreds or something like it, there's no need for that. So I just feel like you can be very selective and it just becomes easier once you get a handle on your printed mess before you even get to the scanning part. So I hope that makes sense, but let me know if I need to clarify. So these photos that you're looking at here are actually photos that came out of that bag of slides. So this was my client's mother on on her trip to Hawaii in 1959, I believe. And he had never seen these before. So he was just super excited to know that she had actually been to Hawaii. I don't think he even knew that. So don't forget those old memories. They come in all different formats. We definitely want to have a look at them if we can. Some scanning tips that when you are looking for just a vendor, or if you're doing it yourself, is think about what format you're going to scan as. A lot of vendors will scan in JPEG, which is okay, but just know that there is a choice oftentimes. I always scan in TIFFs, for example, because it's a higher quality file, and you can make JPEGs out of TIFFs, but you can't make TIFFs out of JPEGs, right? So I always like to see scans happen in the bigger formats, the better formats, and then if we need smaller versions, we go ahead and make those out of the big ones. But it's hard to have a lower quality scan and then try and make something good out of it. So definitely think about what file format you need for what you're trying to do. And if you have JPEGs, don't panic. They're a great format. They're very, versatile and universally compatible. It's just that I want you to understand that there are options in terms of quality that you can select. The same thing with the resolution, which is, the DPI and the PPI. Standard print resolution is 300. And that's what I scanned my photos in, 15 years ago when I did that. That's not great anymore. We have gone to a point where 600 is really the minimum that we scan at nowadays. And some vendors go to even 1200 or higher. And if you're doing slides, we tend to go to even 3000, 4000. So it really depends on what format you have of photo, but just make sure that there's also options there. So just check which one you want. And if you're not sure, be sure to ask for these things that they explain it to you. You can also ask nowadays for different type of equipment. A lot of us now scan with cameras instead of with flat-bed scanners. There's also high-speed scanning where your photos go through like that. So it really depends on the vendor. There's options there depending on what you want for your photos. Also think about how you're going to receive them, right? So some vendors will give you on an external hard drive. Some vendors will have you download from the cloud. Some will give you on a flash drive. Usually it depends on the amount of photos that you have, but there's options there. But the most important one of all that I want to highlight is you want to make sure you ask your vendor if your photos get sent somewhere. Because what we see a lot is that a lot of the low-cost companies, unfortunately, mail photos big distances. Oftentimes overseas to other countries where they can get the scanning done at a lower cost, which is why they're able to compete at that low rate. And if you're okay with that, by all means. But I want you to be aware that that might happen. So definitely ask the vendor that you're considering, or even if you're doing it yourself, that's great. But if you're outsourcing, just ask them, are my photos going to be sent somewhere, or are you going to be handling them? Because I don't know that I'm comfortable with mailing my precious photos, without my knowledge. So just be aware of that. And the same thing goes for media conversion. We don't want to forget about our old films and tapes and all of that fun stuff. So here are some examples of those projects. You can see that we have plenty of VHS tapes there on the left, and then Super 8 and 8mm film on the right. If you have to choose between the two, this is interesting. Actually have your VHS tapes converted first, because VHS tapes are a significant lower quality than real film reels. And the reason for that is because VHS tapes were invented as a distribution system to get basically films out to as many people as possible, as cheap as possible. And they actually degrade much faster than regular film reels. So if you have to choose between the two, start with your more modern stuff. You would think that it's the other way around, but it's actually not. Super 8 film too is really, really great to bring in. Just something that you need to be aware of is if you look at the actual film, you can see that white strip in the middle there, the leader. You see those little holes, those are called sprockets. What happens when film ages is that those become, like the film shrinks and they become closer together, like tighter. And if you run that through projectors, they run the risk of ripping. And something that you want to be aware of is just if you haven't looked at those in a long time, just be very careful so that they don't rip, because the tape might, or the film might have shrunk. what we want to look for with a vendor is somebody that uses a sprocketless machine so that they actually have the ability to send that film through without using those holes. Because you just want to be careful. Those are precious memories, and we want to make sure that we treat them right. So that might cost slightly more, but believe me, it's worth it, because I've seen many ripped film reels in my time. So here are just some examples of some treasures that come out of those film reels. So definitely don't forget about those. I had mine converted when I first got started in this field, and I actually found some really great film of my grandparents who passed away when I was little, which was just really cool to see. So you never know what you're going to find on these. Very exciting to see. So the same thing kind of goes for digitization when it comes to media conversion. So look at the format that you're going to receive and be sure that you ask what they're going to give you. I tend to recommend AVI and MP4 files. AVIs are higher quality. MP4s are what you can upload to the cloud and just watch sort of everywhere. So sometimes you might have to get two versions because you want the good quality as well. Ask them what equipment is used. Make sure it's sprocketless if you're doing film. How are you going to receive it, right? Imagine if you have to download all of that from the cloud, it can take a lot of time. So just make sure that you get that in a way that you can handle. And again, does the media get sent somewhere? We want to make sure that we keep that local if possible, just to be safe. We don't want stuff to get lost in the mail. So with that, I will pause here and see if there's any more questions.
Yes, and just to answer, someone was asking if the presentation slides will be available, and this program is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it again and pause it and take down all the information that you want. Again, it will be uploaded to the library's YouTube page in about a week. But there were a couple of other questions about some of those topics that you've just been talking about, Carolyn. Someone is asking, you know, are those old uh, 8 millimeter films salvageable? And it sounds like they are. Is that
Oh
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And what about 35 millimeter negatives?
Yeah, all salvageable if you just have picked the right vendor.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And let me see if there are any other questions about scanning and that kind of thing. Some of these questions I know refer to things that you're going to be talking about in the future. So we'll let you go on a little bit before that.
Yeah, scanning is a big topic. So if something comes up, we can always address it again afterwards as well. But just it can be a very overwhelming and big topic and with a high learning curve. So if you're considering outsourcing something, that's probably the piece. The rest is easier to do on your own, but the scanning, that's a trickier thing.
Right. And at what point should we be editing, zooming, or reframing the picture?
I'm assuming this person means digitally. Yeah, so I think what I like to see is that you have that one archive where you have the original, what format, regardless, it doesn't really matter, but whatever you have saved, as long as you have a copy, you can then make copies and work on the copies. I hope that makes sense. Like I'd love to see the master archive, and then we export or make copies and we work on those, and then you can have those framed. I like to see the originals preserved, so I hope that answers that question.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And someone is asking, you may have answered this, but when you're scanning photos, what are the best settings to use for resolution? And you referred to those numbers before. Maybe you want to just go over those one more time.
Yeah, yeah. Print standard at the moment is 300. I like to see a minimum of 600 or more.
Okay. All right. I think that probably covers all the questions for now. Why don't you go ahead and we'll have more in a bit.
Okay, perfect. So let's move on then to photo organization. Once you have your photos, let's put it this way, once you have your photos in one place, then we can organize them. Because if they're scattered everywhere, we can't access and see them all in one place, right? And so we can't organize them if we don't consolidate first. So that's usually something that people sort of try the opposite way. Photo organization really just means that you're finding better ways to find them, quicker ways to find them. So as an example, here is a client project again that I've been given permission to share. And you can see here that this was the computer, and you see the files basically in a row. But there's no file name. You know, to find the right photo, we would basically have to scroll through every single one here, and that would just take forever. This was just one folder out of many. So you can imagine, you know, the amount of time it would take to just find the one photo that this person was looking for. However, they didn't want a very complicated system. They really weren't comfortable with the cloud or with programs, and just they wanted something very low tech. So what we did is we just made basic folders, and we made that just in a nesting file structure. So you can see here that we put documents, home movies, and photos, and divided them by format basically. And then we did some categories. This family was big on travel, and so we just divided it up by location basically, because they just wanted to know where the photos were taken, right? So it can be as simple as this. And you might not even have to go into this much detail, right? These were very big travelers, and that's why we have so many locations. You may not have that many locations. There are other ways that you can do this, right? If you are a little bit more comfortable with technology than this particular person was, you can use a program like a Lightroom or Photo Mechanic or Apple Photos or something like that, where we can actually tag and do more fun things with our photos. So tagging is one thing. We can create collections that look for certain photos. We can create albums and folders and have a lot more fun with it and make it more interactive. But it has a slightly higher learning curve. So I don't want you to feel discouraged if you're not comfortable with using these types of programs. Usually they look intimidating in the beginning, and then once you get the hang of it, it's not that bad. But even so, if you just want to use folders on your computer, that's also perfectly valid. I feel like as long as you are comfortable and understand your system, then we're on the right track. So don't feel like you have to do certain things just because other people are doing them. Like, pick what's right for you. Something else that we can do, right, with organization is we can create really cool cloud archives, like you see here some examples of. And there are some great options out there. What you want to look for is storage that you purchase rather than rent. A lot of the times what we see is that new companies, especially the ones in the cloud, they tend to offer a bunch of free storage, and then once everybody gets their photos uploaded there, then they start charging for it. So just be aware that that might happen. We actually just saw Google Photos do that not too long ago. Another thing you want to be aware of is if they degrade the quality of your photo when you upload it, or if they keep the original version. And oftentimes you have to actually pay for the storage in order to enjoy full quality. So what we don't want to see is that you upload a bunch of really great quality photos somewhere, but then the storage itself degrades them. And then let's say you have a crash or something and you have to recover those, then you're only going to get the bad quality back. We want to make sure that we upload the quality that we intended to. Another thing to be aware of when it comes to the cloud is the metadata. So the tagging and the keywords and the locations and all of that stuff. There are very few cloud storage vendors out there that take metadata seriously at this point. I can probably name them all on one hand. So just be careful and check where you're uploading your photos, just to make sure that you're okay with all of those things. And if anybody wants to know more about that, I'm happy to go further into that. But I just want to get the point that organization is about you and how you search, find, and retrieve things, right? So for some people, for example, this client that was a big traveler, they obviously wanted to use maps and locations and things like that. That was important. But let's say that you only have photos of your family and you never travel anywhere. You don't need to use location tags or maps or anything like that, right? So use what works for you. Also think about what type of organization are you interested in? Do you like to search for things, or do you like to browse for things? There's different programs that do different things in different ways, I guess I can say. So if you love to browse, something like Adobe Bridge or Photo Mechanic, a file browser in its setup might be perfect for you. Whereas if you love to search, then you're going to have to pick something more advanced like Lightroom or Apple Photos or another program that can handle that. Um, Also think about like just how you remember things. And I guess that goes for any organization that you do in your life in any area. It's about what is going to stick with you, right? So if you remember the exact date things happened, or let's say if you're a genealogist or if dates are really important to you, you might want to organize by, let's say, dated folders or have dated file names or something like that to help you with that and to make that fun for you. But let's say you couldn't care less. I actually had a client who said, I really don't care about dates. I don't remember when anything happened. I just want to know what the event was. And so with him, we just made folders based on events, Christmases, vacations, and we put all of the years into those folders. So I hope that makes sense. So think about how you like to organize and what works for you. There's absolutely no wrong or right way to do that. It just depends on what you're comfortable with and how you feel you're going to find your photos faster. Okay, let me pause quickly there again, Mary, and just double check that there's nothing before I move on to restoration.
Well, someone was asking, could you give a quick definition or explanation of metadata for photos and what you meant by that?
Yeah, okay, absolutely. So metadata is all the data that describes a digital file. So there are different types of metadata, and this is where this gets confusing. There's technical metadata called EXIF metadata that's basically stamped into your photo the time that it's taking. So that's comes from the camera or the scanner. So like the date that it happened, the ISO setting, or the focal length, the all of that techie stuff, right? Which is helpful to look at if you're trying to maybe recreate a photo or do some sort of photo shoot where you're imitating something. But it doesn't mean a whole lot to us, right? The camera or the scanner does that automatically. Then there's other types of metadata. There's IPTC metadata, which are the stories. So for example, the stuff that the camera or scanner doesn't know, like who was there, or what was the event, or what are the names of the people. And that's the stuff that you have to put into your photos yourself, because there's just no way, at least yet. Hopefully at some point, technology will move fast enough that it will get there, but at least not yet, it's not there. So you are the person who has to put that into your photos. So there's different ways of doing that. You can do it with facial recognition or location tags. So all of that information is metadata. It basically describes your photo. And it's a big topic, so I don't want to throw too much at you, but always happy to elaborate if there's any specific questions.
Okay, great. And someone was asking about how to add metadata, and I think you were just starting to discuss that.
Yeah, you have to basically use a program that adheres to the standards of metadata to do it correctly. Some programs do not, and some do. And unfortunately, a lot of the big guys do not. So we just have to be very careful and make an intentional choice in the programs we use.
Right. Can you identify the difference? You were talking about when you organize the difference between searching and browsing. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Yeah. So searching is, let's say, if you're using a photo program and you type in cat and then you hit search and then all of the photos of your cat pops up. So that would be a way to find your photo. But the way to get to that point is to have that name or the word cat in the metadata of your photo. Nowadays, artificial intelligence are starting to put some of those basic things in there, but a lot of the times it's up to you to actually put that in there. So think of it as your own personal sort of Google system, right? Browsing is if you really don't care about doing all that stuff and you just prefer to work with folders. Think of it as the old time sort of cabinet systems or file folders. If you prefer and you're used to sort of that type of system, then browsing is more of a way to do it. Both both ways work equally fine, just depending on what type of personality you are and how you like to organize them and how detailed you want to go. Putting all those metadata tags into your photos can be very time consuming, but then it saves you time in the long run. So it kind of depends on where you're at with that. I hope that helps. That was a big topic.
Yeah, I think so. Let's go ahead and move into photo restoration, and we'll take some more questions after that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to show you a little bit of photo restoration projects because that's always really fun. It's an easy project that's not overwhelming, that you can sort of get started on and just see if the bug bites you after that. Just revisiting old photos can be really rewarding and fun. So here's an example of a restoration project that we did. This is the before. You can see that this was actually a photo that had significant fading, significant damage to it. This was actually my client. I think she's top right all the way up there. And this was like one of the only photos that she had of her and her cousins opening presents on Christmas Day. And she wanted to restore this photo. And this was actually one of those oversized photos that had been rolled up. So that's why you can see the creases. So this was the scan before. And then I just wanted to give you an idea of what the after looks like. And not perfect by any means, but compared to the faded version beforehand, we felt like it was a significant enhancement, just so that she could actually get this photo reprinted and then shared with all of those family members. And then here is another version of a project. This was actually a very small photo. It was framed and it was actually stuck to the glass in the frame. So you can tell on the bottom, all of that dark area there, that's actually the way it's stuck to the frame. And we realized that if we actually take this photo out, it's just not going to go very well. So what we did was we left the original against the glass, but we scanned through the glass. And this was also very, very faded, but we got really lucky because you see on the sides there was just enough color in the photo left that we were able to resample that and actually restore it. And here we have the restored version. And this was my client. She's the little girl and she was there with her mother and her sister at the beach. One of the only photos that she had as a little girl, and she was thrilled to be able to get that back. This was a tricky one because you can see that there's movement in this photo, but we still felt like it was a significant improvement. And we actually made a black and white version for her as well that she could share and then blow up and make it bigger. So sometimes just getting these old photos back, it's one thing that you can do that's fairly inexpensive, fairly simple. You can do it yourself or you can outsource it, but it really just, it just comes to life again, right? And then you can share it and relive those memories. So very, very fun to do. I think if it's okay with you, Barry, I'll move into family history projects and then we'll stop there afterwards. Because I do want to make sure that I have time to talk about the family history projects as well.
Sounds good. Go right ahead.
Perfect. A lot of us love family history and genealogy, and it's like the biggest hobby nowadays, right? Apart from, I think, gardening, which is like number one. I think this is number two. And we're always used to working with, records like these, right? You go on Ancestry and Family Search and other places and you pull out these records that are amazing. But I also want to remind you guys to pull all of those old heritage photos into your family history project. So here is an example of some of those older photos that you might find in your collection. And just getting those scanned and into those projects where you can identify the people and actually create the story behind it is so powerful. So here was an example from a client project. My colleague, actually did the photo organization part, and then I did the family history part for this person. And you can see that she had found some old framed photos and was able to identify with the help of family members who these people were. So we were then able to take those photos, scan them, and actually get them into her family history reports. And you can tell that it just comes to life in a different way, right? Just putting putting a face to the name makes a huge difference. And we were able also to create the family tree for her and actually get some of those older photos in there. So I think if you're looking for smaller projects, this can be a real fun way to do it. Sometimes it's easier to start with a creative project and actually pull the photos that you want to use into it and get started with that, instead of thinking, oh, I have to take on this massive project before I get to the fun part of creating things. You don't have to do it that way. You can do it in reverse too. And that's what happened in this case. And then after that, she was so inspired to do the rest that she kept going. And little by little, got things done. So I want to encourage you to start projects, even if they're small. Usually they lead to bigger and bigger projects, and you get more and more done that way, and it's more fun. So don't hesitate to do it that way either. All right, and then I'll pause here for the last section before we get into that.
Okay, just a question or two about restoration.
Yeah,
Someone was asking, um, well, first of all, back to film. Can the film be edited or trimmed down? So, for instance, if you have a long landscape shot, to shorten those, is that possible?
absolutely. Yeah. What we normally recommend is just getting the whole thing converted first, and then we can always edit the sections that we want to keep and get rid of the rest. That's the easiest way to do it. It's much harder to tell somebody or to do it yourself, even like, let's just convert this bit of it. It's better to just do the whole thing and then edit.
Okay. And someone was asking about a glass, a very old antique glass photo negative, and
Yeah,
if a photo could be printed off of that or scanned.
absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. It can be scanned very similar to regular negatives. You just have to have a vendor with the right equipment.
Okay. And of course, there are a lot of questions about the different apps to use and how much cloud storage and all that kind of thing. So why don't you go ahead
We'll
into
do
the
that at the end.
section? Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. So let me just give you some quick tips before we get to all that good stuff about how do you do all of this stuff. Okay. So first thing, I want to just put a disclaimer out there. You don't have to do it all, and you don't have to do it all perfectly, and you don't have to do it all today, right? Put this as something that you want to do, and then just approach it one step at a time. And approach it like any other project, right? So what I have here, just keep that in mind, because you've handled many projects in your life already, whether you remember them or not, right? So just approach it like that, and then you'll be fine. So the first step is obviously determine the goal, right? What am I trying to accomplish? And then just backtrack what needs to happen in order for that to come true. Divide that up into reasonable steps. Again, it doesn't have to happen overnight. It did take, you overnight to collect all this stuff, right? It happened over time. So it's perfectly okay to take some time and do a longer project if that has to happen. And then just execute it step by step, one thing at a time, and then just ask for advice and help as you go, and you'll get it done. The best thing that I can, or the best advice I can give you is to break it down into smaller bits. So often we think about a project when it's not actually one project, it's actually many projects. And so often we sort of underestimate how much work goes into a project. So breaking things down and doing things step by step is by far the most important thing when it comes to bigger projects like this. Let me go through quickly the organizing formula, which is a course I actually have for free on my site if you want to learn more about that. But it's basically a project management formula that a lot of professional organizers use. And it goes like this. It goes gather, sort, edit, organize, review, adjust. So let me just quickly jump into those steps. The first thing you always do in any organizing project is you gather everything, you consolidate, okay? Doesn't matter if you're cleaning out your closet and organizing that type of stuff, or if you're doing photos or something else, you always gather everything in one place because it allows you to see what you have and understand what needs to happen next, Okay. It also lets you estimate how long things will take and how much time and money you have to spend on it. So that's always step one. So anytime I take on a new project, doesn't matter what it is, the first thing we do is always think about consolidation. Without that, nothing gets done. So think about getting started on that part first. Step two is to sort. And it just means that you create some sort of category that brings a little bit of order. And if you're doing with working with digital photos, a lot of that can happen actually automatically with the use of software. So it doesn't have to be that you sit there and pick at each file. A lot of that stuff can happen automatically nowadays. It still takes a bit of time, but we don't necessarily always have to do it manually. And let's say if you're using printed photos, um, there are many ways to sort. You could do by year, you could do by event, you could do um, by like a holiday or like a travel, or you could do it by the format that you're using. I mean, there's lots of ways to do it, but it just lets you split things up into smaller bits just to see that I can tackle one thing at a time here. And then after that, what you want to do is edit, meaning curating that collection. So we had somebody early on to say, do I scan everything? You don't have to. And even with digital photos, there is so much decluttering that you can do because we all take way too many photos. We all have way too many copies of everything. So you can get rid of duplicates and bad angles and burst shots and any photo that doesn't tell a story, right? And again, if you're working digitally, a lot of that can be done with software nowadays. Let's say if you are working with printed photos, you can think about, do I have photos that I can give away that somebody else might like? Let's say you went to a friend's wedding. Do you really need those photos, or can your friend maybe enjoy those photos more? You can always give them away. If you got that 2-for-1 deal at Walgreens, you can always get rid of half of those, right? You'd only need one copy. So there's lots of ways that we can downsize a bit before we actually start organizing, because there's no point organizing it if you don't need it to begin with. Right? When we finally get to organization, think about how you want to find your photos, right? Do you want to look for them by year? Do you want to look for them by event or by category, some other sort of way, or by story? There's lots of way to think about it. And if you're more tech savvy, do you want to add keywords or rename your file names or do some facial recognition and have a little bit more fun with them? There's lots of ways to do that. And there's no sort of one size fits all thing. So just don't feel like you have to do what other people are doing. Just figure out what works for you. Then every now and then we have to review our system. And the reason for that is that nothing lasts forever, right? Technology changes. Boxes may need to be moved if they're physical prints. We just want to make sure every now and then that we check in on the system that we have and that we actually just make sure that it's still working, nothing needs to be updated, or do we need to make any changes, right, to be more efficient? Obviously, with technology, that is going to be a bigger thing. It's a lot more, believe me. There's a reason I do this full time, just to keep up on all the changes, with Apple and Google and Amazon and everybody else. It is a lot that they throw at you. So just make sure that you check in every now and then. You want to make sure your backups are current and all of that, just to make sure that everything is safe. And if anything needs to change, obviously we adjust it at that point, right? Tech updates is going to be the big thing, but you may get a new phone and you may have to switch your system. There might be a new organizing method that comes out. AI is big right now, artificial intelligence. All of our conferences are always filled with lots of people talking about AI coming and this and that update. So who knows what's going to be in store for us, but the best thing we can do is just make the best of what we have access to at the moment. And staying sort of somewhat updated on that will help a lot. Just checking every now and then and making sure that you fix if something's broken. But yeah, I definitely want to encourage you to get started on something, even if it's a small project. You can do this. It's not that hard once you figure it out. You just need some steps in the right direction to get going. So I hope that was helpful and somewhat inspirational, at least for you, to see all those different projects. And I am happy now to answer more questions.
Yes, and we do definitely have some more questions, but if people
Perfect.
you need to disconnect and watch the recording later, just a reminder that we have recorded this program and we will continue the recording with the additional questions. So you could go ahead and watch that on the library's YouTube page. Again, that recording will be uploaded in about a week, and then you can pause it on any of these screens. And we certainly want to say thank you to you, Caroline. But of course, there are a couple more questions.
Happy to answer.
Several people have been asking about collecting photos from various types of devices,
Yeah.
maybe multiple phones, anyway, you
Yep.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. It can get very overwhelming, but what I always recommend doing is buying a new fresh external hard drive, for example, with just lots of space on it. Nowadays they're not that expensive. For $100 you can get 4, 5, 6 terabytes worth of storage. Just making a folder, what device did it come from? Moving it over. And the next device, what device was it? Let's put that in a folder. Once you get everything consolidated, then we can start to actually deduplicate, we can start to organize. But the first thing is always getting it in one place. Getting the best quality possible that you can in one place, and then we can start to, and that's also when you can back up this whole thing, right? And keep it safe. So we always want to back up that mess before you actually start working on it, because we can always go back then to what it was if something happens.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Someone is asking, do the USB drives with photo software really work? And how do you know if the best photo is kept?
Yeah, that's a good question. They work, but what you need to understand is that it's basically a regular flash drive, but they have a software put on them that looks for certain types of file formats. And usually it's JPEGs. So if you plug it in, it might pull out all of the JPEGs that you have. The problem happens when you have other things, right? So if you scanned in TIFFs, for example, it's not going to find any of those. And those are actually the higher quality that you want to save. So depending on the situation, can they be useful? Absolutely. But I wouldn't trust only that. If it helps, I would want you to do another review manually to make sure you have everything.
Okay. Someone is saying, can you comment on what type of external drive is good to use to store photos, like an idea of the size that's needed and whether a solid state drive is important?
Yeah, if you can get a solid state drive, that's absolutely great. Those they tend to be more reliable. But even if not, you can still get very good quality drives. If you can get them like shockproof and waterproof and all of that, there are some of those on the market that are really great, because why not? The better quality you can get, I would say go for it. If you can, whatever you can afford, get the best in that price range, basically. There's lots of good brands out there. Let's see. Silicon Power, IOSafe, Seagate, plenty of great brands out there that you can do some research on. What you need to keep in mind is that because we often have so many duplicates, is that you oftentimes need 2 or 3 times the storage than your actual collection, because sometimes we have duplicates from different devices and things like that, right? So I would say if you can afford a 1 or 2 TB, that would be my minimum. You don't have to go crazy to like 8 or anything, but I would say a 2 TB is plenty of storage for all your photos and videos with, everything. You also want to remember that if you're actually going to get all of your movies converted and film and all of that, that takes up more storage, right? So whatever you can afford in your price range, go for it.
Okay, great. You had mentioned cloud storage services. Which ones do you recommend?
Yeah. So for cloud storage, the 2 big things that I tend to look for is digital rights, meaning terms of agreement. What can they do with your photos? And, do what can you do basically to keep them protected, and what is your right versus the company's right. And then I also look for the metadata issue, because what we don't want is for you to sit there for hours and hours entering keywords and then you upload them and they're gone or they get stripped, right? It's redundant work. So we want to make sure that at least those two things are really solid. So off the top of my head, the companies that I can think of that do a really great job would be forever.com, photo shelter, and let me think. Yeah, it's a short list. The ones that are geared toward photographers tend to have better metadata handling because photographers are very knowledgeable in general about metadata. So the more towards that photography niche that you go, the better they tend to be. But we do have some other ones nowadays, like Forever, that are coming out with quote unquote archival storage, meaning that you purchase it versus renting it. So I'm sure I'll think of a couple more later on, but it's a fairly short list at this point in time, unfortunately.
Great, thank
Yeah.
you. You mentioned storing digital photos on external hard drives, flash drives, and up in the cloud. Which do you recommend?
Yeah, it's a good question. What I like to see in general is a combination of things. I always feel like your main archive, you probably should have it locally, either on your computer or an external hard drive, so that you're not reliant on a third party to access your own photos or an internet connection or something like that. But I also love to see a backup to the cloud, right? Because it's an offsite security blanket for if something happened to your home or your computer, right? So we want to see a combination of things, and we just want to make sure we choose the best quality we can.
Mhm.
Yeah.
A couple of people asked about just the rudimentary getting your pictures from a phone onto the computer. Is there an easy way to do that, or a video to watch that
Yeah.
would help people walk through that process?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on what system you're in. In database programs like Apple Photos, um, there are a couple different ways. For example, you can sync to your desktop, you can do AirDrop, you can plug your phone in, and then there's also exporting programs. There's lots of ways to do that, and it unfortunately all depends on what system you're using and how. Um, there I have plenty of resources on my website, and I'm happy to answer that more specifically for each person. If you just want to give me a call or an email, I think it'll be easier because it just depends on so many factors in your situation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Can you give us the idea, approximate cost range to get something converted? For example, on maybe a reel of film or a couple of VHS tapes.
Yeah, it also depends on the vendor and the quality that you're going to get back. Um, so sometimes we see some of these, lower cost vendors. Uh, you'll get a better deal there, but again, they're using lower quality equipment and they may be sending it overseas. And so I think it all depends on your comfort zone. Um, I really love it if you can keep it local, just because the less time they have to travel, the better, the less risk they are of getting lost. And I can make a really good recommendations. For example, for here in the Chicagoland area, my colleagues over at Memorable in Northbrook have fantastic equipment, and they do really, really great quality transfers, and they are very competitively priced. So if you're looking for a local service, I can definitely recommend them. They do a great job, and you can look on their website as far as pricing. But I want to say $25 to $50 per film reel is average. $20 to $25 per VHS tape, and then for prints it tends to go lower than that. In slides it's more in the dollar range. But again, if you're more selective about what you're converting, then it's worth splurging a little bit and getting a better quality. And you don't have to convert everything at once. You can always do a couple a year.
Right. Speaking of being selective, someone is asking, what are some of the criteria you use in deciding whether to keep or discard similar photos in a collection?
Yeah, so it's very subjective in a way, right? It might be a photo where I'm smiling or I'm not smiling. So it tends to depend. And I just think if the a photo tells the story, and if you feel like, yes, this is something I would put in an album, definitely keep it. If you're sitting there thinking, it's a great picture of my roses, but I don't know that I necessarily need to pass it on to my grandchildren. Maybe you put it, in the storage box, but maybe you don't put it in an album. I mean, it all depends. I think it's just a matter of what's important to you, what you
Right.
want to pass on. Yeah.
Right. And there are a couple questions related to if you scan, then what do you still need to keep? So, for instance, let me ask the first one. If you scan your photos, is it necessary to save all of the negatives?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I actually get that question a lot. So here's the thing. Is it necessary to keep it? No. I have had clients where I've scanned giant archives. In fact, remember that big project I showed you with the 27 bankers boxes? They had everything shredded at the end of the project. And the reason for that is that they were on the go. They lived in different parts of the world. They just did not have anybody who could store it. They just didn't want to store it. And in certain situations, that's okay. But also remember that the master original copy that you have is always going to be the best version of something. And a scan is technically a derivative. So if technology improves and you want to go back at some point in your life and rescan and get a better quality, if the original is gone, you cannot do that. So for example, with my collection that I mentioned that I scanned 15 years ago, now I'm actually going to go back this year and rescan everything for myself because 300 DPI is not good enough anymore. I want it in a much higher resolution now that technology has improved, especially now with 4K and 8K and all that stuff that's coming out. Technology will change. So I say if you can store the masters, if you can store all those originals, do it. It's worth it. Um, do you have to? No, but just know that you can't go back and redo something.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that makes sense.
Someone is asking if I delete photos from my iPhone, will they also be deleted from my computer?
Yeah, so that depends. If you are using Apple Photos and iCloud as a system, it's all synced. Syncing means that everything looks the same no matter where you look at it, right? So if you have your phone and you have iCloud turned on, think of it as a little satellite that beams down everything, right, to the same place. So if you have iCloud and your computer's connected to that, your phone's connected to that, if you delete something on your phone, it deletes there and then it deletes there. It syncs that change, whatever change you make. So what you would have to do is turn off that connection, right? You would have to turn off iCloud. Then you could make changes. Just know that if you then connect it again, the changes will sync again, right? So there's a way that you have to sort of strategize in what order you're going to do things. I hope that makes
Okay.
sense. It's
Yeah.
tricky.
Uh, Someone's asking, do you know of a good app that will allow you to search for objects, for instance, if you were trying to do that searching that will download on Android phones? And they give an example of my friend can search for kites in her photos. And they have like about 4,000 photos and are interested in being able to search for things on an Android phone.
Yeah, so those types of sort of AI based searching features tend to be in the big consumer grade programs like Google Photos and Apple Photos. In other types of programs, that just isn't there. It has to often be something that syncs with the cloud and to your different devices, and has to be a database and all of that for that to work. So I would say Amazon, Google, Apple, those big guys will be able to do some of that. It's far from perfect, though. If you want a keyword on your own, you can put those things in, but that's a little bit more time consuming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Someone's using a Samsung phone or and tablet, and they're wondering, is it better to build files or get a photo editing app and asking if you have any recommendations.
Not quite sure what you mean by building
I
files.
think maybe just putting them into folders, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it depends on your ultimate goal, right? Is the goal to edit your photos or is it to organize them? I think it depends on what you're trying to do, because if you are all organized on your phone or you have everything on your phone and you're comfortable with that, then you can just download an editing app and go have fun. But if you're not comfortable that your photos are backed up and all of that, I would say start with the organization and then move into some of the other stuff when you know it's backed up.
Okay. Um, can tintypes be scanned?
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. All
Mhm.
right. Another quick question. Are 35 millimeter film negatives recyclable?
Um, I believe there used to be one service. I'm not sure if they are still in business, so I would have to check on that. Um, Off the top of my head, I'm going to say no in general, but there may be one company. I would have to check on that if they're still there.
Okay, and this might be a good question just to end with tonight. Someone asks, how do you recommend dealing with the emotions that come with just an overwhelming pile of years of photos and unfinished scrapbooks and such as so many of us are facing?
Yeah, yeah, I know that feeling. Believe me, I've been there. um, the biggest thing is to not take on too much, right, at one time. Just to make sure that you have the energy to sort of take it on. Um, there's different things there because something like a scrapbook is a project, right? That might not be finished for whatever reason. So the question becomes, how many projects are you taking on? If you're organizing your photos, if you're doing scrapbooks, right? We tend to take on a lot of projects. And I think that the biggest thing to remember is to do one project at a time and then making those projects manageable in terms of their size. So oftentimes when we see the overwhelm, it's just because there's either too many projects or it's just not broken down for like far enough. So I would say, can I break this down even further? So let's say if I had a big collection, let's say I have negatives, photos, scrapbooks, documents, films, VHS tapes, right? My thing is consolidate, that would be one project. Sort by format would be another project. And then each of those formats would be another project. So for example, the consolidation would just be, hey, let me find everything and put it into boxes, right? And then the second part would be, okay, now all reels go together, all photos in one box, right? And then I can take that box of reels and I say, okay, now what I'm going to do with these reels? Am I going to get them converted? That's a project, right? Before we move on to the negatives, right? So I would break it down more like that and not usually we just sort of look at the whole thing and go, oh no. but you have to just step back and say, what is the smallest thing I can do here?
Great, great.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. This has been really helpful, and hopefully we've gotten most people's questions answered, but we
hopefully.
do have your contact information here, and I will be sending that out to everyone who's registered for the program. And if you are watching this recording and would like Carolyn's contact information, it's here right in front of you, but you can also contact us here at the library at ce@wheatonlibrary.org. That's CE like community engagement at wheatonlibrary.org. So thank you so much for all of your time and effort to put this together for us and ask and answer all of our questions. We've got a lot of
Absolutely.
thank yous coming through on the chat and in the Q&A. So thank you, Carolyn. Everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. Hopefully you got some great information. Please stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you again soon. Good night.
Good night.